everyone, welcome to a sort of impromptu video regarding the captaincy of the Carlton Football Club. Obviously announced this week that Sam Docherty was stepping away from the captaincy role to focus on himself. Obviously his battle with cancer over the last couple of years, more last year, has sort of taken a lot out of him, obviously physically. And it was, a very unselfish decision in the end to step down and give another opportunity for someone else, which is what it seems. So I thought in this video I would sort of go over who I think should be brought into that leadership group. I think there's not really a lot of options to look at, and I think you could see a lot of combinations that people are talking about, but I think it's very straightforward where the option is, at least in my opinion. But I thought I'd talk about it, get your opinions on what you think the captaincy or leadership group should look like going into this year. So obviously we've had Cripps and Docherty in that role for a couple of years now. Personally, in my opinion, I never loved it. I thought Cripps is a player who should always be focusing on his game, on his positions in the ground, where he is around the ball. Docherty, I haven't seen a problem, but when he hasn't been playing as much, I think he loses a very key leadership role that is important, especially as a backman where you can see the whole of the ground. You can look forward, tell people what to do in a matter of seconds, compared to a midfielder who is constantly on the ball around the contest, putting their head, over the ball to win it. So they're not aware of where other people are most of the time. They have a good idea. They'll look and, strategize before the center ball goes up or a stoppage, a ball up. They'll be aware. But I don't think Cripps should be captain. Not because he's not a good leader. I'm sure he's a good leader, but I think for him that shouldn't be his focus as someone who's such a talented footballer when he focuses on the football aspect. Whereas Docherty, I think, had a better opportunity where he could see the ground, see the opportunities that there were to give advice, speak up when in a matter of seconds, like I said, compared to the coaches who obviously you're waiting for breaks constantly. So I think leadership, especially on the field, is making those adjustments in a matter of seconds and stopping those momentum shifts, etc. So I think it's quite a big loss with Docherty. So this sort of takes us to a couple of options that will suit us at least going forward. I guess the actual setup of our leadership group hasn't been decided. So whether they're looking at a sole captain and a vice captain or two co-captains yet to be released. Personally, I think one captain, one vice captain does the job. I don't think you can go wrong with that because realistically they both have the same roles. But I think, I don't know, if I was a vice captain, I wouldn't feel as much pressure, but I would feel that expectation that, okay, I can do the little things here. So that's what I think should happen. Personally, I think they will do a co-captaincy again, just based off what we've just seen. I don't think they'll change anything unless, internally there's, votes on who is captain, what type of structure. Because you never know, these things sort of, we decide these things as fans without knowing anything, who we think. But personally, I would love to see a bit of a surprise with the players deciding this. Obviously we wouldn't know if they decided. Well, it'd be very unlikely anyway, but I would love to see something like that where the players got to decide and have that input, which I'm sure they do. But that's sort of where we bring ourselves back to our two main options. So we have Jacob Weitering in the back line, which is probably, as speculated, the number one option, but I don't want to read too much into that because anyone can say anything about anyone. But yes, he is the most likely option if we had to take a guess as supporters. And then obviously Sam Walsh. So these are the two main ones. Weitering for me, perfect as an option for a captain, vice captain. like I said, defenders are probably the most important position on the pitch. And I mean, if we compare them to forwards, where their role is to solely kick goals, and realistically, even though they transition defensively, their role is sort of, two-dimensional. They'll never really go outside the realms of goal kicking and creating opportunities, compared to defenders who are defending, transitioning, and then acting as a defensive line when the ball is in our forward line to, rebound and stop that transition. So they're constantly seeing what's going on ahead of them. So that's why I love Weitering as an option. He did have a bit of experience this year, I think, against Collingwood when Cripps was out. He did captain. I mean, not enough to... You can't really take a lot from that with one game, especially when you can't hear, or, with such a small sample of games played where he's captain, it's hard to say whether his tactics work or not. But personally, I think for him, he's at a stage in his career where he's, six, I think he was 2015, so this is his 7th year now. He's matured, he's ready to take that next step. His game's already at quite a high level where he can focus on something else. Whether that is a negative or a positive impact is to be seen, whether he gets it or not. But I think for him, someone who can direct everyone is pretty important, even for his own game, to figure out the way he wants to structure himself around his opponents. He seems very tactically aware of everything that's going on around him and able to shut down his opponent, whilst also being able to cover the half-back line and the sort of full-back lines that can be rotating constantly depending on who you're playing. So I love Weitering as an option. I think it would be a great fit, just to have a bit of variety between your midfielders and your defenders, being Cripps as the midfield captain and Docherty as Weitering as your defensive captain. It would be a really good fit. And this is where it sort of moved to Walsh. And I hate the thought of him being captain. And yet again, this has nothing to do with leadership, because leadership can be presented in so many different forms and so many different techniques, where you don't need to have a label in order to be a leader on the field. And Walsh is like that representation as someone who doesn't need labels to perform to the highest standard possible. So that's why I think for him, especially for someone that young, which it's never a bad thing to bring him in that young, but for a team that at least hasn't had the success rate that we would have liked over the last couple of years, there's still a heap of pressure for him to perform and get this team to a winning standard, compared to Cripps, who at least has captained them through a losing period, so at least he's adapted to what they've gone through. Whereas Walsh, he's going to have a lot of expectation to, take everyone to the next level, and that's, and it's enough to do him to take himself to the next level, especially at this stage of his career where he's young, and even though he's already a gun, he's still developing right in front of our eyes every week. So I think putting him in a captaincy role would really take away from what he wants to do on the ground, because, captaincy is pretty... I would say it's pretty challenging mentally to perform to a high leadership standard every week, where you're relied on to give instructions to lift a team. And like I said, with a team who has been losing quite a lot, if that did keep happening this year, which I still think, until I see wins, it just seems like there'll be more losses because we're used to it. But with it, if the team does start losing early on, that would be quite a massive workload for Walsh to lift a team that has failed for quite a long time. So I just think Walsh as a player, when he's still in a development phase, and unlike Weitering, he's had his development phase by now. I think last year, 2020, not 2021, 2020 was sort of where he completed his game. I'd like to say, he figured himself out completely, compared to Walsh, who he could go anywhere, and you never know, 1 or 2 years from now he could be a completely different positional player and very dynamic that way he is. So for Walsh, I just think it's too tough of a challenge for him. Even though he's up to it, his role is so important that if you change it at all, it might, it might mess with the whole connection of the team, whole compatibility of, connecting with one another on the field and having that in sync sort of mentality where everyone knows what to do. I just think for him that's not where he should be. But that's sort of where it brings me to a couple of players that most likely won't be involved, but I wouldn't be surprised if they aren't. So one, I would think Ed Kerno, just solely based off experience. If you want a guy that's going to lead you, he's probably the perfect guy. And this is where I go back to how leadership is showcased in many different ways. It's not just someone who tells you where to go, even though, on a footy field it is. But he's a person who, in terms of tactically swinging a game momentum wise, he's someone who they probably still look to every single game. So Ed Kerno as like a vice captain option, I wouldn't see as a very bad idea. I think it would be a smart call to lift the pressure off people like Walsh, even Cerra. And even though it's his first year, these young guys, like you're in that team now, so you're not a new guy, you're part of that team. So someone like Cerra even could pop up. You never know. And George Hewitt, those are two that, especially George Hewitt, I think, coming off the Sydney team that they never look to, let's be honest, they never really have a period of failure apart from 2020. They're always successful. He's been through grand finals at least. He's a guy that they'll look to, and he'll present himself each game as a really high impact player who will make a difference each quarter, or put himself on the line when they need to. So it's players like that I think could be involved, and it wouldn't be a bad idea if they were. But it's very hard to call, and I think we're also fed up with losing and that constant failure mentality that I think we just want it to work. But I'm not sure. Personally, I think Weitering should be, but I would love to see something different. Something that is just spontaneous, you don't expect it. But other than that, I think that's where we're at the moment. Forward-wise, I just don't think a forward will get it. Maybe one, but if I had to give one, look, Sylvain is the only one I could see stepping up to that role. He's definitely earned it if he does get it. So, but yet again, forwards, then, they don't have too much to do on game day in terms of being constantly 360 around the ground. They're in their zones and they're only focused on themselves. And if I was a forward, I'd be focused on getting the ball and kicking the goals, not worrying about what the defender's doing at the back, etc. So it's just most likely going to be either a midfielder or a defender. But we just hope for the best, don't we? Because we are so sick of failure just all around the board. We never ever get a good run of anything at this club, or at least recently. So let's just cross our fingers and hope. Leave your thoughts in the comments. Tell me who you think should get any of the roles. What you think what the structure should be, because that is another interesting topic itself. Let me know who you think will get it, what you expect for the year in terms of leadership roles. But otherwise, thank you guys for watching. Hope you enjoyed, and until next time, go Blues.